Hello and welcome to this edition of Back in History. Back in History sets out to refresh our memories on the events that took place in the historical past. In this edition, we bring to you the text of Nelson Mandela's speech on the day of his release from prison after 27 years of incarceration at the Victor Verster prison in Cape Town, South Africa. Not many names in the entire continent of Africa and the world have had the privilege of gaining the type of recognition and mention that has been accorded to Nelson Mandela in human history. He was a towering figure whose name resonated across the globe. He was famous for several reasons. For the Aboriginal South Africans, Nelson Mandela was a hero and a true symbol of their individual and collective struggles. He was their mouthpiece and a fighter for their emancipation and freedom. To the powerful and dominant minority white government of South Africa at the time, Mandela was a stubborn black South African who was too daring and vociferous and who needed to be put constantly in checks. Eventually, a decision was taken to lock him up in prison, and true to the decision, Nelson Mandela was locked up in prison where he remained incarcerated for a record period of 27 years. This level of incarceration was unprecedented in the whole of Africa. But during this period of his incarceration, the African National Congress ANC, of which Mandela was a registered member and leader, mounted pressure on all sides and sustained their call for the release of their leader and compatriot, Comrade Nelson Mandela, along with others detained with him. They held rallies and wrote several petitions to the government and demanded unequivocally for his unconditional release. Student bodies across South Africa also held protest marches for the release of Mandela. Several countries in Africa and other parts of the world joined voices in their call for the release of Mandela. Despite these calls and protests, the government remained adamant and remained so for an unbroken period of 27 years. The pressure later became too much, with very important personalities at the global scene and across Africa making specific calls for the release of Mandela. With the repeated calls at home for his release and the calls from the VIPs across the world, a decision was later taken by the government to release Mandela from prison. Mandela was informed of this, and the prison authorities were also notified to make adequate preparations for his release, including preparations to ensure his safety and security. When Nelson Mandela himself became convinced that he was indeed about to be released, and knowing fully well that the people of South Africa would love to hear directly from him, he began to pen down a speech in anticipation of the day of his release. The date was eventually fixed, and the date was 11th February 1990. Here is a text of the speech which Mandela delivered to a mammoth crowd on the day of his release. Unquote. Friends, comrades, and fellow South Africans, I greet you all in the name of peace, democracy, and freedom for all. I stand here before you not as a prophet, but as a humble servant of you, the people. Your tireless and heroic sacrifices have made it possible for me to be here today. I therefore place the remaining years of my life in your hands. On this day of my release, I extend my sincere and warmest gratitude to the millions of my compatriots and those in every corner of the globe who have campaigned tirelessly for my release. I send special greetings to the people of Cape Town, this city which has been my home for 3 decades. Your mass marches and other forms of struggle have served as a constant source of strength to all political prisoners. I salute the African National Congress, It has fulfilled our every expectation in its role as leader of the great march to freedom. I salute our president, Comrade Oliver Tambo, for leading the ANC even under the most difficult circumstances. I salute the rank and file members of the ANC. You have sacrificed life and limb in the pursuit of the noble cause of our struggle. Mandela went on to salute members of the armed wing of the ANC, most of whom had lost their lives in the struggle for the freedom of South Africans. He saluted the South African Communist Party, the United Democratic Front, the South African Youth Congress, COSATU, and several others who fought tirelessly for his freedom and for the freedom of South Africa. He also thanked the world community for their great contribution to the anti-apartheid struggle. He also thanked his wife Winnie and family for the strength given to him during the long and lonely years of his imprisonment. Mandela then continued, unquote, "Today, the majority of South Africans, black and white, recognize that apartheid has no future. It has to be ended by our own decisive mass action in order to build peace and security. The mass campaign of defiance and other actions of our organization and people can only culminate in the establishment of democracy. The destruction caused by apartheid on our subcontinent is incalculable. The fabric of family life of millions of my people have been shattered. Millions are homeless and unemployed. Our economy lies in ruins and our people are embroiled in political strife. Our resort to the armed struggle in 1960 with the formation of the military wing of the ANC was a purely defensive action against the violence of apartheid. The factors which necessitated the armed struggle still exist today. We have no option but to continue. We express the hope that a climate conducive to a negotiated settlement will be created soon so that there may no longer be the need for the armed struggle. I am a loyal and disciplined member of the African National Congress. I am therefore in full agreement with all its objectives, strategies, and tactics." He went on to say, "The need to unite the people of our country is as important a task now as it always has been. No individual leader is able to take on these enormous tasks on his own. It is our task as leaders to place our views before our organization and to allow the democratic structures to decide. On the question of democratic practice, I feel duty bound to make the point that a leader of the movement is a person who has been democratically elected at a national conference. This is a principle which must be upheld without any exceptions. Today, I wish to report to you that my talks with the government have been aimed at normalizing the political situation in the country. We have not as yet begun discussing the basic demands of the struggle. I wish to stress that I myself have at no time entered into negotiations about the future of our country except to insist on a meeting between the ANC and the government. Mr. de Klerk has gone further than any other nationalist president in taking real steps to normalize the situation. However, there are further steps as outlined in the Harare Declaration that have to be met before negotiations on the basic demands of our people can begin. I reiterate our call for inter alia the immediate ending of the state of emergency and the freeing of all and not only some political prisoners. Only such a normalized situation, which allows for free political activity, can allow us to consult our people in order to obtain a mandate. The people need to be consulted on who will negotiate and on the content of such negotiations. Negotiations cannot take place above the heads or behind the backs of our people. It is our belief that the future of our country can only be determined by a body which is democratically elected, on a non-racial basis. Negotiations on the dismantling of apartheid will have to address the overwhelming demand of our people for a democratic, non-racial, and unitary South Africa. There must be an end to white monopoly on political power and a fundamental restructuring of our political and economic systems to ensure that the inequalities of apartheid are addressed and our society thoroughly democratized. He went on to say, still on quote, "It must be added that Mr. de Klerk himself is a man of integrity who is actually aware of the danger of a public figure not honoring his undertakings. But as an organization, we base our policy and strategy on the harsh reality we are faced with. And this reality is that we are still suffering under the policy of the nationalist government. Our struggle has reached a decisive moment. We call on our people to seize this moment so that the process towards democracy is rapid and uninterrupted. We have waited for too long for our freedom. We can no longer wait. Now is the time to intensify the struggle on all fronts. To relax our efforts now would be a mistake which generations to come will not be able to forgive us. The sight of freedom looming on the horizon should encourage us to redouble our efforts. It is only through disciplined mass action that our victory can be assured. We call on our white compatriots to join us in the shaping of a new South Africa. The freedom movement is a political home for you too. We call on the international community to continue the campaign to isolate the apartheid regime. To lift sanctions now would be to run the risk of aborting the process towards the complete eradication of apartheid. He continued, still on quote, "Our march to freedom is irreversible. We shall not allow fear to stand in our way. Universal suffrage and a common voters' role in a united, democratic, and non-racial South Africa is the only way to peace and racial harmony." In conclusion, I wish to quote my own words during my trial in 1964. They are true today as they were then. At that time, I noted thus, unquote, "I have fought against white domination and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve. But if need be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." End of quote. This speech was televised live in several TV stations and other platforms from around the world. Radio stations also hooked on to broadcast the speech live. South Africans became more emboldened to continue in the agitation for freedom and equality for all. In 1994, elections were held in South Africa, and Nelson Mandela emerged as the first black president of South Africa. His speech on this auspicious day of his release from 27 years of incarceration shall continue to resonate in South Africa, the greater Africa, and the whole world at large. Thanks for watching this episode of Back in History, and do remember to subscribe to the channel or follow the page for regular notifications.